Representative Crago. Representative Chestick. Representative Harrelson. Representative Jennings. Representative Nemec. Representative Oakley.
Here.
Representative Provenza.
Here.
Representative Rodriguez Williams.
Here.
And Chairman Washut.
Here. Okay, first bill for this morning is House Bill 214. House Bill 214. I'll just make a few introductory comments here before we get going, just to remind everyone of the process here. Okay, so welcome to the 67th annual session. Please turn your cell phones off. Remind myself. If you need to make a call, please leave the room. If you intend to propose a substantive or lengthy amendment to either bill that we are discussing this morning, we'll need a written copy for each member of the committee and two for our staff. If you need to have copies made, the copy center is across the hall and Miss Sandy Dent will assist you. The meeting is being streamed on a wyomingleg.gov website. The link is located on the meeting calendar page. Those not wishing to testify online are encouraged to simply watch via the Wyoming Legislature's YouTube channel. The order of testimony today will be the bill sponsor and the sponsor witnesses, other legislators wishing to testify, state agency or court officials, representatives of interested organizations, and members of the general public in the room and online. We ask all of those testifying to press the microphone button until the light turns from red to green. Say your name, and if you're new to this committee, please spell your last name for us. Please speak clearly and speak up so the committee, those in the room, and the audience listening online can hear and understand you. Then add the agency or organization that you represent. If you are here as a private citizen representing yourself, please tell us where in this great state you reside. Remember that all dialogue must first be addressed to the chairman. Witnesses are expected to remain polite and civil during testimony. Audience members online wishing to testify should register now using the testify button provided on the committee's meeting notice. Those registering will be emailed a link to participate via the Zoom platform. Handouts for the committee should be transmitted to each committee member at legdocs@wyoleg.gov. Audience members are encouraged to watch the proceedings via YouTube until their topic of interest is introduced. For those online, at the time that I call for public testimony on a topic, those wishing to testify may raise their virtual hand and we will call on you as time allows. Staff will then modify the attendees' credentials, at which point they will need to have their video turned on and their microphone unmuted. Following testimony, staff will then modify the attendees' credentials again as needed. Public testimonies will not last longer than 3 minutes each. Unless an extension is granted by the chairman. I expect on our second bill, we will probably have quite a bit of testimony. And again, the 3 minutes will be fairly strictly enforced. I will have access to see which attendees have raised their hands in the virtual world, and I will do my best to indicate who's up next or on deck so we can prepare. Once a virtual attendee has concluded testimony, or does not anticipate providing testimony, please monitor the proceedings via the YouTube channel so that others may join the meeting. Only a limited number of people may be queued to provide testimony online. So the bill or bills being discussed are located on the meeting calendar page on the legislature website, and we begin with House Bill 214. Representative, tell us about your bill.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thanks for taking time to hear this bill. A regulatory sandbox program promotes efficiency in government. It allows innovators to bring to market new and innovative products that do not fit within the existing regulatory structure on a temporary and conditional basis. Particularly in states where the legislature meets so seldomly, the slow speed of government can often mean death to any product that requires a change in government. The goal of a sandbox is ultimately long-term regulatory change based on successful demonstrations. This is how it works. An applicant with an innovative product submits an application to the Wyoming Business Council. The Wyoming Business Council would share the application with the applicable agency that regulates the offering. The agency would identify any likely harm to consumers, health, safety, and financial well-being, as well as make a recommendation to the WBC that the applicant either be admitted or denied entrance to the sandbox. The WBC would perform their own investigation of the applicant focused on consumer protection. The WBC would either approve or deny the application and submit the application to the SLID board for final approval. If approved, the sandbox participant would be allowed to demonstrate their product in Wyoming for 2 years with specific conditions. This includes reporting requirements and extensive disclosures to consumers about what it means to be using a product operating in a sandbox and the risks associated with it. And Mr. Chairman, given the length of this bill, I'm not gonna walk through it extensively, but I think there's one important thing to point out on page 6, line 22, which basically says nothing shall be approved that would be in violation of federal law, jeopardize national accreditations, or any standard, any national standard. So we're not trying to preempt federal law with anything in here. And additionally, it's Utah has had their sandbox in operation for a little over a year now, and they generated a report based on what had happened over their first year of full year of experience with this, and which is actually really helpful to kind of get a good picture of what might go through this. So they had 10 applications. 2 of them were approved, 3 are still pending, and 4 were denied. And I think the first one on here on this report is a really good example of the really small and inconsequential types of exemptions that would actually make it through this process. It was a towing dispatch company, and basically under Utah law, they could only charge a fee to the owner of the vehicle for 3 different ways. And all of them had to do with the phone calls. Like, it had to be called in to the tow company and dispatched by a phone call by a few different people who are qualified to make that phone call. This company was a web-based company, so they essentially wanted to do the same thing, but they wanted to make that dispatch effort over the internet and not over the phone. And that's a really good example of the kind of things that I think would be approved through a sandbox. This goes through multiple bureaucracies and the SLIB board, elected officials, and that really filters out anything too crazy from getting through. It was brought to my attention that maybe the committee would like to rename this a regulatory bouncy house, and those have been tried before, and there was significantly more risk associated with that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for Representative Andrew? Representative Craigle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Representative. So a couple of questions. We saw this last year, I believe, or something similar. And so my first question is, this bill draft, is there anything we need to know about that's different from the one we reviewed and went through last year?
Representative Andrew.
Mr. Chairman, this bill draft is identical except for the trial period, which based on, what's happened with this going through other states, we extended that to 2 years instead of 1 because we thought that was a more reasonable period for a business demonstration.
Follow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So does this particular bill draft apply to insurance products?
Representative Andrew.
Mr. Chairman, yes, it would.
Representative Craigle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then one final question before somebody else asks you something, Representative Andrew. Do we have an idea what this is going to cost to stand up this program within the Business Council? I mean, how many employees, et cetera? What's the financial impact to the state?
Representative Andrew.
Mr. Chairman, we have a good idea based on Utah's experience. They basically were located, I believe 3 people to be able to work on this. In the beginning, they did not hire any of those people. They found it very easy to stand up, and then they eventually hired a research analyst once things started getting going.
Representative Andrew, you have a fiscal impact attachment to your bill, but no appropriation. You want to explain that?
Mr. Chairman, because we got the fiscal notes basically after I submitted the bill, and I think that's probably a good estimate of the long-term cost if this is a program that is being used, regularly. I think in the beginning, the fiscal cost would probably not be quite as much as the fiscal note.
Representative Andrew, is it your anticipation that the funding would come next year in the budget bill?
Mr. Chairman, yes, based on the interest we see once the program is potentially set up.
Further questions, Representative Shestak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Andrew, you've identified Utah as one state that has done something like this. Are there other states that have done similar things?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Chestik, yes, Arizona has passed very similar legislation. I believe they actually did it by expanding one of their existing sandboxes and making it universal. And there's quite a few other states that have this in the works and pretty far along in the process in their legislature this year. So it's actually an effort to try to get this in really the majority of states and then work towards coordinating it and setting up a federal sandbox as well. So yes, it's in other states and it's being worked on to be in more.
Other questions? Saying that, do you have a primary witness with you today? Or do we have a state agency that wishes to testify on 214? All right, please bring Josh in.
Stay here.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Are you able to hear me?
I am. Please introduce yourself and your agency and then tell us what you'd like us to hear.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Josh Dorrell. I'm the CEO of the Wyoming Business Council. And I wanted to just make a few comments on this bill. The Wyoming Business Council, obviously, we recognize the value in streamlining government regulations in order to kind of ease the art of doing business in the state of Wyoming. And it's really important for us to maintain what we already have as one of the most business friendly states in the nation. That's not just our fiscal climate and our tax policy, but it's also our regulatory environment and our ability to get things done through the regulatory bodies in the state. Those are considered when these rankings are provided. And so we're already in some ways very, very regulatory friendly, if you will. I do think that we need to consider a few different things, though, as we look at this. One is something you mentioned, which is the fiscal impact. And that is something that our agency, and I think you might have heard this in the Joint Appropriations Committee or another committee, I should say, that we're stretched pretty thin doing the things that we want to do, which are really build resilience in communities, create great jobs, and get rid of any barriers to growth. And I think that that's an area that remove barriers to growth, we need to also dive in on. And so think about this for a minute, as we go out and talk to entrepreneurs, and we're really looking at those primary employers with high growth potential, this is not necessarily a topic that comes up a lot. And when we do talk with businesses, especially in a recruiting sense, about the access to the agencies within our state for regulatory compliance, we're quite a bit different than the states that they come from, and we're different in a good way. And so I just want to make sure that the committee has an opportunity to dive into the particulars of the fact that it might require or will require for sure on our end some more headcount. And we've noted that in our fiscal note, and that's something that is important for us to have and to make sure that we can kind of spin the plates that we're spinning today, as well as add this on. I think it's an important component to that. The other element is to look at, is this the biggest need for entrepreneurs and businesses in our state, and make sure that we are staying lean in every way that we can. And so I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that the rulemaking, the administration of this program, the effect that it might have, just to balance those out as you look at the problem we're trying to solve, which is, again, really developing those great jobs in our communities, those primary employers, as well as breaking down any barriers to growth and building that resilience in our communities. And so, this is something that we look at all the time with our business retention and expansion, as well as our entrepreneurship coordinators. They are looking at this if this is a problem all the time. So I just want to have you consider those elements as you're looking at this, and I'm happy to stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dorrell. Committee, any questions for Mr. Dorrell? Mr. Representative Chestic.
So, Mr. Dorrell, thank you for attending and giving us your thoughts. I'm not quite clear. Do you think this bill helps your projects and is a useful thing? I mean, are you in favor of it, or do you think there are some concerns that we need to think about? Mr. Dorrell.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Chestek, that's a great question. And what I would say is again, in general, we definitely believe in keeping Wyoming streamlined, which in a lot of ways we already are. So this is not something that we hear about a lot. It is not something that we think that there's a great volume or is going to kind of unlock some giant opportunities for us. But at the same time, we recognize that it's an effort to keep things streamlined, and we appreciate it. As far as that goes, it's just not something we hear about an awful lot compared to the other things that we hear about from entrepreneurs, like access to capital, deal flow in the state, other entrepreneurs that they can work with. So those are elements that we tend to focus on more than something like this regulatory environment.
Further questions? Mr. Dorrell, the bill calls upon the Business Council to verify that the proposals don't violate any federal regulations, any federal laws, any accreditation standards. That sounds like a pretty heavy lift. Business counsel up to that task?
Mr. Chairman, that's also a great point, and I think we're part of that mix, right? And there is a very short timeline. I think it's 25 days to do a lot of this analysis and looking, and I would say that perhaps other regulatory agencies could weigh in on whether that is reasonable or not. That's a heavy lift, and even if it is 1 or 2 or 10 per year, I think it's a heavy lift, and I think we have to balance that heavy lift versus the benefit that it gains. And right now we are not staffed to do this kind of work. We would absolutely have to staff up and develop really at least and then this is noted in our fiscal note, at least a person for that. But again, that could change depending on what we find when we start diving into it.
Thank you. Anything further? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Durrell. Appreciate that. Your testimony this morning. Ms. Delancey has joined us at the table. Please introduce yourself and tell us what you want us to hear.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Cindy Delancey, and I'm the president of the Wyoming Business Alliance. I want to start out by applauding Representative Andrew for bringing this bill before the committee today. As you can tell, he spent a tremendous amount of time trying to develop these concepts and really trying to find a way to help us continue on our journey to be the most business-friendly state in the nation. So with that, I certainly applaud his efforts. The Business Alliance does spend a lot of time talking about how we can improve regulatory climate for our businesses in Wyoming. And we really see this as really nothing more as a tool to foster innovation. And that really helps us stay competitive with our neighboring states. As you heard from Representative Andrew, Utah and Arizona are already light years ahead of us in this way. And when it comes down to companies evaluating where they want to do business and how they want to do business, having a tool in the toolbox, which is a sandbox, would help Wyoming again keep that competitive edge with other industries. So I think that there's probably a lot of room for consideration if there's concerns on how to move this forward. But really with the multiple layers of regulatory oversight, which is kind of ironic to have these layers of oversight still being able to be faster than dealing with some of the regulatory climate as a business works through government is kind of, interesting to see. But with the SLIB board, the WBC as consumer protection disclosures, plus the time limits that we feel that, this really isn't something that's just completely, just a free for all. There are some pretty, deep sideboards on this. As far as the fiscal impact and the cost to stand up, what I hear Representative Andrews saying today is to establish the framework to see if there is an interest from the business community, and then come back at a later time and assess what resources and tools are needed to be able to review these applications. But as far as maybe the 25 days might be a bit ambitious based upon Director Durrell's testimony, but the Business Council are experts. This is what they do. This is what they look at when any project comes to Wyoming, if there's conflicts with federal and state regulation and laws, and maybe if there is a desire for this to move forward at some time, additional resource certainly might be necessary. But I think the question before the committee today, is this a concept worthy of considering and trying to, again, give us another tool to help us foster innovation in Wyoming? So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delancey. Questions? Representative Craigle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I suppose this could be a question for either one of you, but could you give us like a concrete example of a particular law that this would apply to, so we can, and I'm having a hard time picturing this in my head. So what does this look like if somebody comes to the council and says, I want law X? Give us that law X that this might apply to.
Representative Andrew?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Craig, it is a little bit of a hard question to answer because this is for innovative ideas that we might not even know exist yet. Like Ms. Delancey said, it's a tool in the toolbox for something that might come in the future. I think the best examples I can give you come from things that applied to the Utah sandbox, such as the towing service who wanted to dispatch by a web-based application rather than a phone call, but the law was extremely prescriptive in how that had to be done. So, I mean, as you can imagine, with all the input it needs from multiple government agencies to get through this entire process, no massive change of regulation is going to make it through this. This is mostly going to be things that were unintentionally outlawed through the legislative process, and nothing that was very specifically outlawed.
Mr. Chairman, if I may tack on to that.
Ms. Delancey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Craigo. You know, really, what I see and what our discussions have been has just that this is a tool for building for the future. You know, this all the more reason of why we, you know, a slow start makes sense, just to, you know, kind of have this in there to be able to build for the future, to be able to continue to modernize. You know, at times, businesses sometimes fall into a precarious position when the statutes don't keep up with the speed of business. You know, like our statutes are reviewed only as, you know, kind of requested, as opposed to something that could be there as a framework to help us as technology changes, as the desires of the business community, as consumer desires change, to really help us be able to stay on the cutting edge and really looking to the future as opposed to maybe looking towards the past. So again, I see this legislation and the bringer obviously will correct me if I'm wrong, but really something, you know, conceptually looking forward as opposed to being able to address a concrete deficiency in our statutes today.
Further questions? Thank you. Any legislators in the room wishing to testify on House Bill 214? Seeing none? Any other state agencies want to testify on 214? Members of the general public wanting to testify? Mr. Winnie.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. I support the bill. I see this as an effort to establish something which would be a single point of contact that a business would go to across multiple agencies. Because sometimes you get 2 or 3 agencies and they all have the ability to say no or whatever. One of the great strengths of the Navy's nuclear propulsion program when they set it up was they have both a U.S. Department of Energy people involved and the U.S. Navy people involved, and they come together with a single person who's authorized to give an answer for both agencies. And so I see this as an attempt to go down a similar path, and I think that'll be good for Wyoming. Because of that bringing together of the authority to act. Subject to your questions, thank you.
Questions for Mr. Winnie? Thank you, sir. Anyone else in the room? Anyone on Zoom world on 214? Seeing no further testimony in the room on 214, committee, your preference? Before we close public comment, Representative Andrew, any final comments?
Mr. Chairman, if the committee decides to look at this bill, I think to address the business council's concern of the 25 days, maybe just moving that to 45 days would be pretty reasonable. If I remember correctly, I think we actually did that when we got this through the Minerals Committee last year. So thank you.
Representative Cradle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, I just had one more question for Representative Andrew. I mean, and I think the chairman, he jumped ahead of me because I was going to ask the question he asked about the appropriation that's not in the bill. I mean, are you opposed to us doing that since it's, I mean, we're obviously going to have to spend money this year alone on the business council and a lot more next year. Are you opposed to us putting something into the bill as an amendment so that least we got those costs covered. I mean, not sure it's enough because it doesn't cover the other agencies that are also going to have some sort of fiscal impact because the point of contact is the council, then it goes to the other agencies that. This is how I understand it. And then they're asked to review the request, make sure it's okay, or they don't see any major problems with it. At some point, I think we'll have to build more into that. But are you okay just for now, is at least covering the business council expenditures?
Representative Andrew.
Mr. Chairman, my hesitation with that would be is I think that every agency has staff that can do this kind of research and is doing this kind of research. I do think if this was a highly used program, it would add to the workload significantly, but it should not be something that's outside the scope of what they do already. However, if that is the will of the committee to add something in, I'm, certainly not going to stand in the way of that. So,
All right. With that, I'll close public comment. Committee, what's your preference? Motion by Representative Rodriguez Williams, second by Representative Jennings. Proposed amendments. Representative Rodriguez Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we amend the bill on page 12, line 8, from 25 to 45 days is what I hear is.
Everybody clear on the proposed amendment? Discussion on the amendment? Representative Jennings? Nope. Discussion on the amendment. Debbie, you clear on the amendment? Page 12, line 8, changing 25 to 45. All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The amendment has passed. Further amendment. Representative Cragel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't know exactly where to put this in the bill, but I think we need to include a section for the appropriation, at least for fiscal year 2023. I don't think we have to do the following year because that can get addressed in the budget. So it would probably fall under on page 31, we'd create a new section 4 and include an appropriation for the business council of $35,000 for fiscal year 2023. And then section 4 would be renumbered as section 5 on page 32.
Okay, so the amendment, do you have a second? Representative Provenza seconds. So the proposed amendment is to add a section 4 on page 31 at the bottom, which would appropriate $35,000 to the Wyoming Business Council for 2023.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And then renumber section 4 on page 32 to become section 5. We have that? Okay. Discussion on the amendment. My only comment is we could also do a budget amendment to the budget bill. So that'd be another approach, but I think this works as well. Okay, all in favor of Representative Crago's amendment to add $35,000 appropriation to the bill, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
The amendment has passed. The amendment has passed. Further amendments, House Bill 214. Seeing none, call for the question. Question being called. Debbie, recall the roll for House Bill 214.
Representative Cragel,
Aye.
Representative Chestick,
Aye.
Representative Haroldson. Representative Jennings, Representative Nemec,
Aye.
Representative Oakley,
Aye.
Representative Provenza,
Aye.
Representative Rodriguez Williams,
Aye.
and Chairman Washut.
Aye.
We have a total of 9 ayes and 0 noes.
Representative Andrew, you'll carry the bill on the floor? Okay. So House Bill 214 has passed committee number 1. Which brings us now to House Bill 152, which as anticipated, has a large number of people waiting to testify. Just a reminder, we're going to try and limit testimony to 3 minutes. My objective today is to take testimony today, and the committee will work the bill on Wednesday. So testimony will be start with the sponsor's witness, then we'll move to legislators, state agencies, and then we'll start taking public comment. We have a hard end. We have to be on the floor at 10 o'clock. The speaker has cautioned chairman to make sure that we are in our seats. So we have a quorum at 10 o'clock. So about maybe 9:50, I will close public comment and we'll wrap things up and move to the floor upstairs. So Representative Provenza, comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Given how many people we have here today, and I want to be able to hear what folks have to say, I'm wondering, and certainly this is your will, Mr. Chairman, maybe considering hearing from legislators after, given that we have access to each other pretty much 18 hours a day so that we can hear public comment.
I'll ask the legislators to also be 3 minutes or less in your comments. Today is the day for public comment. Today is the day. So we will move through as expeditiously as possible. But we have our order and that's the order we'll attend to because some of the legislators may have other meetings that they need to scurry off to this morning as well. So with that, just remind everybody in the room, we're certainly aware of how passionate people feel about this particular issue. It is my intent to hear as many people as we possibly can this morning from both sides. And once we get into the public comment, I'll ask for someone to speak in favor of the bill, someone who's opposed to the bill. We'll go back and forth. Try and give as many people as possible opportunity to be heard. And probably not everybody's going to get to speak. I'll just say that right up front. And it's nothing personal. It's simply that you have a citizen legislature that tries to get a whole lot done in very few days. And that's what we're up against, a tight clock today. So that's why I'm going to go back and forth for and against to try and get as many people as possible on record. So with that, Representative Rodriguez-Williams, please walk us through the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of the Judiciary Committee. Rachel Rodriguez-Williams with House District 50. This morning I present to you House Bill 152, titled Life is a Human Right Act. This bill relates to abortion, provides findings and purposes, and creates a new act, new state statute. Essentially, it's 19 pages long. It prohibits abortion, specifies criminal and regulatory penalties and civil remedies, provides for exceptions. It specifies applicability and severability, provides the right for intervention. It makes conforming amendments, renumbers current provisions in the Green Book on abortion, repeals and removes obsolete and conflicting provisions as well. It provides for rulemaking, and the effective date would be July 1, 2023. And if you would like, I can.
Okay, you want to walk through any details? Call our attention to any specific provisions within the bill that you want us to pay special attention to?
Sure. So essentially what the Life is a Human Right Act does is it confirms that the people of Wyoming, through their elected representatives, have made clear that they believe life is a human right, and that women deserve real support. My colleagues and I that have co-sponsored this bill want to preserve the lives of the most vulnerable while ensuring women have real support. And I just want to clarify whether or not you want me to walk you through the bill or not. Okay. All right. So looking at page 2, we have the title under 35.6.120. Findings and purposes under 35.6.121 under subsection A. The legislature finds that the legislature as a co-equal branch of government may make declarations interpreting the Wyoming Constitution as a consequence of an unborn baby being a member of the species Homo sapiens from conception. The unborn baby is a member of the human race under Article 1, Section 2 of the Wyoming Constitution. Moving on to page 3, the legislature acknowledges that all members of the human race are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, the foremost of which is the right to life. We cite some areas of the Wyoming Constitution there. Moving on down to page 4. The legislature in its line 13, the legislature in the exercise of its constitutional duties and powers has a fundamental duty to provide equal protection for all human lives, including unborn babies from conception. Wyoming's legitimate interests include respect for and preservation of prenatal life at all stages of development. Moving on to page 5, the protections of maternal health and safety, the elimination of particular gruesome or barbaric medical procedures, the preservation of the integrity of the medical profession, the mitigation of fetal pain, and the prevention of discrimination on the basis of race, sex, or disability. And we cite Dobbs versus Jackson in that area there. Moving on, under 35.6.122, looking at definitions, there is a new definition of abortion, the bottom of page 5, line 14 there. On page 6, there are some exceptions, specifically on line 4 under A, save the life or preserve the health of the unborn baby. B, remove a dead unborn baby caused by a spontaneous abortion or intrauterine fetal demise. And under C, treat a woman for an ectopic pregnancy. It goes on to define pregnant, reasonable medical judgment, unborn baby or unborn human being. And then on page 7, under 35.6.123, we talk about abortion prohibited. Moving on to page 8, 35.6.124 covers exceptions to the abortion prohibition and applicability. Moving on to page 9, under 35.6.125 penalties and remedies. On the bottom of page 9 and carried over to page 10, under 35.6.126 professional sanctions and civil penalties. Moving on to bottom of page 10, 35.6.127 civil remedies. Carried through page 12. The bottom of page 12, we insert 35.6.128 construction, right of intervention and severability. Bottom of page 13, 5.8.102, talk about jurisdiction. Page 14, under 35.6.132, complications of abortion, matter of record, exemption. All the way to page 16, the bottom of page 16, line 21, penalty for violating Wyoming statute 35.6.130. And I'll specifically mention that under lines 2 through 5, under that section, the violation is an offense punishable by a fine no more than $10,000. Moving on to line 7 under statute 35-6-135, a right to damages for discriminatory employment practices for refusals to perform an abortion. 35-6-138 at the bottom of page 17, use of appropriated funds for abortion are prohibited using state funds. That is about it. It's a lengthy bill, and I would stand for any questions from the committee.
Questions for Representative Rodriguez-Williams? Representative Chester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Rodriguez-Williams, you have an undefined term on page 4, which I think could cause some concerns among a lot of people. And that is on line 15, page 4, the word conception. The life of every human being begins at conception. How do you define conception? Is that fertilization or is that implantation?
Representative Rodriguez-Williams.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you give me a moment.
Line 15 on page 4.
Under the light, Representative or Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, Representative Chesnick, Chesnick.
Yes.
Under the Life as a Human Right Act, I would draw your attention to page 6 under line 12. Under the definition of pregnant means that the human female reproductive condition of having a living unborn baby or human being within a human female's body throughout the entire embryonic and fetal stages of the unborn human being from fertilization to full gestation and childbirth. So the bill specifically references fertilization. If you're interested in adding a definition, I would be interested in hearing.
Thank you.
Further questions for Representative Rodriguez-Williams? Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman Rodriguez-Williams. So I got several questions, but I'll start with the first one. Is this particular bill language based on any other model language?
Representative Rodriguez-Williams.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Craigo, could you be more specific? Are you talking like the definition of abortion or the bill in its entirety?
Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, any parts of it, all portions, I mean, is obviously the parts regarding the Wyoming Constitution aren't necessarily based on model language from other states, but outside of that is the language in here based on model language from other states that have tried this particular, use this particular language.
Representative Rodriguez-Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Craigo, the bill in its entirety, the act is not modeled from or duplicated from any specific state. There are some pieces within the bill and definitions that do duplicate language from other states.
Representative Craigo. Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, just further on that, just to say it, that like, so where did this come from? As far as the language, like I don't think it was LSO that drafted it. So can you tell us where, the entirety, the body of this language came from?
Thank you.
Representative Rodriguez-Williams.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Oakley, the act was a collaborative effort of multiple state pro-life stakeholders throughout the nation, within the state of Wyoming, a collaboration of numerous Wyoming lawmakers and boots on the ground pro-life advocates as well. So there's been a lot of work that's gone into this bill and quite a bit of collaboration as well. Thank you.
Further questions for Representative Rodriguez, Representative Craigle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairwoman. So I had a couple questions on, and let me preface this, I'm worried about the constitutionality of this bill as drafted. I've told you that. And so I'm just trying to get to the bottom of that. And so I have some questions. For example, on page 3, and where we start quoting or referring to provisions of the Constitution, lines 14 through 18. Could you explain to me how this bill furthers all of those separate provisions? Because I'm probably not following. I mean, I went and looked them all up. So I'm just trying to figure out how or why it furthers the purposes set forth in those particular provisions.
Representative Rodriguez Williams, the Wyoming Constitution language on page 3.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Craigo, just confirming, you said page 3, lines 11 through 14?
Representative Craigle,
Thank
14.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 14 through 18.
Mr. Chair.
Let's let her answer the question
I
first.
think we have a problem though.
What's
Because she's
wrong?
been referencing page numbers that don't align with ours. So I'm wondering if we have 2 different page numbers going on here.
Different, we don't have the same draft in front of us or something.
So we're on page 13, line 4, or page 3, line 14.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Craigo, I apologize about that. And I have an extra copy in my folder if you need me to replace this one. So yes, page 3, lines 14 through 18 states the provisions of Article 1, sections 7, 18, 33, 34, and 36. And Article 21, section 25 of the Wyoming Constitution are also promoted and furthered by this act, recognizing that an unborn baby is a member of the human race. So essentially what this act does is just further, it gives further findings and confirmation from this body that we uphold these areas of the Constitution. And when you talk about underline 17, recognizing that an unborn baby is a member of the human race, essentially that's what this act is further confirming. As we know, and we learned in Dobbs, there is no constitutional right to abortion. Abortion is now left up to the states. The 14th Amendment uses the word persons. We do know that the preborn are members of the human race. They're legal and constitutional persons. And this just further defines that.
Representative Craigle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Vice Chairwoman, I'm thinking about this from a legal perspective, right? Not necessarily from a policy standpoint. And so, for example, we have referenced in lines 14 through 18, we referenced section 33, article 1 of the Constitution. Section 33, I'll read it to you, says compensation for property taken. Private property shall not be taken or damaged for public or private use without just compensation. I don't know how that applies to what we're talking about. And I mean, I can go talk about the rest of these that are referenced right in that particular provision. And I'm worried we're just setting ourselves up for a failure right off the bat, a legal failure. And so I guess those are that's my question on all of these provisions specifically. How do they apply to the topic we're talking about within the bill?
Representative Rodriguez Williams can address the property aspect of section 33.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Crago, I think perhaps you might hear further testimony from some folks in the audience that might clarify that more in depth to meet your legal answers to your legal question or the legality of that question and specific to 33.
Further questions? Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess kind of along with that same thinking, if what we're doing is kind of furthering some of these amendments in our constitution, why are we doing this in statute rather than maybe amending the statute, the constitutional amendments?
Representative Rodriguez Williams.
Chairman Washit, Representative Provenza, I don't think it's in the best interest of the majority of lawmakers within the body to sit on their hands when we could be in the business of saving lives. And so what this act does is essentially it's further movement to do that, as we were elected to do, many of us. Thank you.
One more, then I think we need to get moving along, bring other people to the microphone, but have your question, Representative Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Vice Chairwoman. So I just have one more question, and it's on page 12, and it's regarding the intervention right. And essentially, I guess, what is the intent? What is your intent with that particular provision within the bill? Are we saying that the legislature is going to pay for that legal intervention? And if so, where does that money come from? Or are we just saying, hey, any co-sponsor of the bill can become a named quote unquote plaintiff or defendant, depends on how the case comes, can be a named party within the suit. We're providing statutory standing. What exactly is the intent of that?
Thank you, Chairman Washit.
Rodriguez Williams.
Sorry, jumped the gun there. Thank you, Chairman Washit, Representative Crago. The latter of the two or the three. So there is no fiscal note in this bill. What that does is yes, it does provide a right of intervention, and it goes into detail there. And I'll leave it at that.
Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Rodriguez Williams. So I kind of want to go a little more on that, and in addition, reference page 2, lines 13 through 15. So I'll start with the follow-up on the last question. So not just money, but is there and where's the precedent that a legislator would start, intervening in court cases? And then in addition, and also these lines 13 through 15, the legislature as a co-equal branch of the government may make declarations interpreting the Wyoming Constitution, which sounds a heck of a lot like we're infringing on the judiciary there. So both of these together, I mean, is this specifically, are we pushing the legislatures and individual legislators' role in a way that's in violation of separation of powers?
Representative Rodriguez Williams.
Thank you, Chairman Washit. Representative Oakley. In regards to lines 13 through 15 on page 2 that you referenced, you mentioned the word legislate or judiciary, and I assume you're talking about the judicial branch in particular. I would push back against that. I don't believe that these legislative findings that are included in here are going to save the statute essentially from judicial review. This declaration won't prevent the judicial branch from reaching a contrary conclusion through judicial review either. And essentially the judicial branch, yes, does have the final word when interpreting the Constitution. However, the legislature can and should make its own interpretations. Every time that we pass a state statute that may implicate the Constitution, the legislature, through the statutes, impliedly does so. And so I would push back against that.
Further questions for Representative Rodriguez-Williams? Representative, my question on that line on the intervention aspect is traditionally it's the Attorney General's office that acts to defend statutes that this body passes. And I think the separation of powers question comes in and whether or not having individual legislators join in that effort, is that a separation of powers concern?
Chairman Washut, thank you for your question. It is not a concern to me.
Real quick, Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to roll away from the legal side for a second, just ask a question. In this, what I want to make sure of is in this act, are we protecting in the case of like a tubal pregnancy where there is no implantation in the uterus, where we have a very severe situation where there is a pregnancy, but it's not viable for the baby or the mother. Obviously, at that point, you need to address that. This won't in any way, shape, or form come against that, correct?
Representative Rodriguez-Williams.
Chairman Washut, Representative Haroldson, that is correct. There are medical exceptions in there, and I'd be happy to, if there were specific questions, to answer those as well.
Okay. Any legislators in the room wishing to testify? Seeing none. Do you have a key witness, representative, that you wish to have testify?
Chairman Washut, members of the committee, yes, I have Fred Harrison next to me.
Mr. Harrison, will you state your name and spell it for the record?
My name is.
Keep your comments brief so we can have a time.
Sure. My name is Fred Harrison, and that's FredHarrison. I'm an attorney and a citizen of the state of Wyoming and have practiced law in Wyoming 45 years. And I was a member of the legislature until 1992, and I served on the Judiciary Committee. So it's changed a lot since I was last here. I will try and be brief. I want to try and answer questions, though, and to the extent that I can. On the constitutional where did the bill come from? First of all, I want to address that. Where did the bill come from? It comes from three major sources, and that would be the Americans United for Life, their draft legislation, and Alliance Defending Freedom, their draft legislation. And it comes also from North Dakota. And the provisions in regard to definition of abortion come specifically from North Dakota and our current law in North Dakota. And for the exceptions that they have, such as we mentioned, tubal pregnancy would be the ectopic pregnancy, which is an exception under the definition of abortion itself. So that's where the law comes from. As to the constitutional purposes, I have a unique perspective because I represent Wyoming Right to Life as an intervener in the lawsuit in Jackson, Wyoming, that has been brought against the trigger bill. And what we've tried to do in this bill is to, and I agree with you, the exception on property is kind of ridiculous, but that's pled in the litigation. And it's something they say has been violated, is violative of the Constitution by denying people a property right in pregnancy. Don't ask me why. That's part of the basis of their lawsuit. They've also said that it's healthcare. I will point out to you that abortion has been illegal in the state of Wyoming from 1869 till 1973. And in all stages, rape, incest, everything was illegal in the state of Wyoming since 1869 when we were a territory. And insofar as the amendment of the Constitution, I don't think we need to amend the Constitution because the Constitution already defends human life. and human life is when this legislature says it would be. I disagree fundamentally with the thought that the legislature does not have a role to play in constitutional interpretation. Every time you pass a law, you've made a constitutional interpretation. Madison, and I think it was Federalist Paper 48, says you are a co-equal branch of government. That's where that language comes from. You have a perfect right to say that. And these findings trace exactly the lawsuit in Jackson, Wyoming, and the questions that the court is asking. And every time the court asks that question, it says that you have acted vaguely in the past. By being specific in this act, you are doing what the courts have demanded you do. Be specific, and you've defined things and you've made findings in regard to into the law. I don't think this could be unconstitutional law because you're acting in a constitutional manner. And the Supreme Court of the United States has said in the Dobbs versus Jackson case, as quoted directly in this act, that you have the obligation to protect maternal health and safety, and you are. Abortion was never considered healthcare until the Supreme Court, a bunch of lawyers that put on black robes, decided that it was healthcare. That's where that comes from. And ever since we've said healthcare, you look at the Hippocratic Oath. What's the second provision? 2,500 years of history. Second provision, procure no abortion. It says it right there in the Hippocratic Oath. That has been conveniently left out of the Hippocratic Oath by physicians at this point in time, that, as you say here in this act, you're trying to protect and preserve the integrity of the medical profession. And that's exactly what you're doing. The integrity of the medical profession was never to perform abortions.
All right,
Was
question for Mr. Harris.
Thank you.
Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Harrison. So currently abortion is illegal in Wyoming, correct?
No.
Mr.
correct.
Harrison.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I got to get back into the habit. That's not correct. Right now, there's an injunction preventing that act from being in effect, and abortions can take place in Wyoming.
Governor Craig.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Harrison, we have a law on the books that says abortion is illegal, and we're currently going through a pending lawsuit to figure out whether that statute's constitutional or not. Correct?
Mr. Harrison.
That's correct.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman. I did say that. I thought I said it. Oh, okay.
Further questions? Thank you. Okay. Any state agencies testify on the bill? Okay. Others wishing to testify from agencies, interest groups? None? Mr. Lehman? Please keep your comments brief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mike Lehman, representing the Catholic Diocese of Cheyenne. I find myself in a little bit of a difficult situation. On one hand, we've been advocating for Medicaid expansion. That was the very first bill I testified in favor of in 2015. And I took a lot of pushback for that from people around the state. And one of the common emails I get, don't you know that Medicaid dollars can be used for abortion? Ever since I've received emails and calls from similar ones to that, it seems we're being asked to play a zero-sum game. We're supposed to pick, either advocate for the unborn or the working poor who do not have access to healthcare. But we refuse to play either or politics. We prefer both and types of policies. And no matter how many times a new legislature says no to Medicaid expansion, we'll say, okay, if not Medicaid expansion, then what? And if not now, then when? How many years will we look our neighbors in the eye and say no? So our support of expansion is firm and will be ongoing. And yet we're subject.
Mr. Lehman, is this related to House Bill 152 in some way?
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir. Yet we're subject to the witness that was given last week with regard to our desire to protect the unborn. There were a handful of healthcare providers who testified against the bill. Of the many who testified in favor of the bill, no one was a medical provider, not even one. And I know there are many healthcare providers who seek the legal protection of the unborn, but they prefer not to get into politics. I get that. But at a certain point, they need to understand what is happening to their profession when they stay silent. I listened to one testimony after the other of healthcare providers avoiding referencing the unborn in any way that would suggest that they see the unborn as a second patient that they're responsible for. If my wife and I were a young couple shopping for an OBGYN in Wyoming, we'd be taking notes. We support science. We support our healthcare providers. We supported them when they went through the hellish politicized experience of COVID-19. They do a tremendous job, but we're calling, please help us fight for the integrity of your profession. We also call upon the legislature as well. There are many points throughout statute that call upon what the state defines as the best interest of a child. It's throughout statute. And yet, with regard to this particular question, which is a difficult one, understood, we turn a blind eye to what is in the best interest of the child. So we would ask also that the state work for its own integrity, be consistent. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would stop and ask or stand for any questions.
Questions? Representative Oakley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Deacon. I'm just going to ask you two questions, just in the interest of time. So one, you were in the Revenue Committee when we heard testimony, and specifically, we have the ability, and we do put sideboards in regards to Medicaid expansion in Wyoming that prohibits any dollars to be used for abortion. So you're aware that that does exist with our draft of Medicaid expansion.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lehman?
Representative Oakley, yes, I do. I am aware of that. And that is my answer to all those emails as well, as we can put sideboards up and do both.
And one more.
Representative Oakley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then, so I guess just to clarify and to discuss this, on the whole, I mean, this legislature passed a ban last year. So, and that's being reviewed currently, by the judicial branch. But I mean, this was undertaken and this has been done in Wyoming. I mean, you agree and understand and recognize that as well.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lehman?
Representative Oakley, I do recognize that as well, but as was stated earlier, in the courts, there were certain provisions that were laid out. As a non-attorney, that's interesting to me that they would point to, for example, to property. And if the courts are asking those questions, it makes sense to me that we would want to find those answers and define those.
Okay. Representative Harrelson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lehman. So with that being said, so we're coming out of this injunction, and I think from what I've seen, there was a lot of questions being asked of the legislative branch. Well, what do you mean here? What do you mean there? And so if I'm correct, this is clarifying a lot of those questions that came up. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman.
Are you the one to answer this question?
Representative Harrelson, I don't believe I am, but that's how I would, from what the former speaker said, that's how I understand it.
Thank you. No further questions? Okay. With that, I think we're ready to move into the point counterpoint approach to testifying on the bill. We've laid the foundation. We've heard a witness testify in favor of the bill. Is there a witness who wishes to testify against the bill? Dr. Hinkle. Please keep your comments brief and to the point. Introduce yourself to the committee and tell us what we need to hear.
Thank you, Chairman Washit Committee. My name is Dr. Renee Hinkle. I am an OBGYN physician in Cheyenne, Wyoming for 24 years. And I am here to testify in opposition to this bill. it is definitely just a point counterpoint to the lawsuit that's currently happening against the trigger bill that is currently under injunction and not being enforced. I'm definitely not a legal expert. My understanding is that even if this passes, it doesn't affect that lawsuit, that they can still question all those things, even with this bill. But again, I'm not an expert on that, so I won't testify to that. My concerns, it's going to be difficult to get through in 3 minutes, but my concerns mainly are partly the definitions. I mean, all these statements that they make are not defined things. Conception, who defines when life happens? There's legal experts, there are religious experts, there's scholarly experts who have not ever made that definition. And why do you as legislators suddenly get to just declare that this is the case? Jewish faith believes that life doesn't occur until the baby's born. So you're making these statements from a Christian point of view, but not every person in this state is Christian. We're also, there's so many things. Abortion is healthcare. Abortion is part of reproductive rights. We as physicians definitely take the fetus as our second patient. We believe we do everything in our power to save babies. That's what we do all day, every day. We are not trying to terminate fetuses. The legislature in general, this session is trying to criminalize physicians. I mean, this gives a felony penalty to a doctor. And do you think a doctor is going to do something questionable if they have the possibility of somebody just thinking that they have a felony against them? I mean, this is going to affect our patients. Doctors are going to be afraid. Doctors are going to be afraid to treat pregnant patients who have complications. And we've seen it already. Even though the ban is not in effect, we have transferred patients to Colorado because several of our physicians are afraid to get involved in a questionable situation where they're using their best judgment, but they're afraid somebody's going to question that. And that's going to happen more and more and more as we get into this, especially if you're criminalizing, if you're making it a felony. That's a scary thing. Our hospitals are not going to allow us to do something questionable. That's going to delay care. That's going to mean women are going to have complications. They may not die from it, but they're going to have blood transfusions. They may have permanent problems. There are medical issues that we have to take care of. And it can cause problems for women. It's going to delay their care. Even if we say that ectopic pregnancy is ectopic pregnancy is excluded as well as miscarriages. But not everybody's gonna follow that because they're going to be afraid. And so these women are not going to get the appropriate care they need. The American Medical Association, the American College of OBGYN, the WHO all believe that abortion is healthcare. And so these are national and international groups of people who believe that abortion is a very important part of women's healthcare. How Representative Rodriguez-Williams can sit up here and say that this is going to help protect women. How does this protect women? How does this give women support? This does not give women support. This penalizes, women in many ways. And I don't disagree that people feel very strongly right to life. I think everybody should be able to make that decision. That's an opinion. If you have an opinion that you're right to life, great. Do that. Don't get an abortion. Don't believe in those things, but don't necessarily put that on every single other woman in the state. As far as physician integrity, this is going to really hurt physician integrity. It's not going to help physician integrity. This is going to put problems back on physicians, and we're going to have to deal with it. People are going to start doing illegal procedures, and we're going to have to follow that and deal with those complications. It does not help physician integrity.
Thank you. Questions for Dr. Hinkle? There's none. Thank you very much. A witness in favor of the bill, Mr. Winnie.
Chairman Washit, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. As I see things, the essence of this bill is who gets to decide We're at the point in the medical world where a 20-week fetus in one part of a healthcare facility may be aborted, and in another one rushed off to a neonatal intensive care unit because of a premature birth. Well, who gets to decide? Well, I know some of those things are not easy. In the Navy, women that become pregnant are not allowed to go to sea on ships, very specifically because things like ectopic pregnancies, if they rupture, can bleed out very, very quickly. And despite healthcare on ships, and we have a lot of women on ships and submarines, we have to be very careful about that. On the other hand, from the legal perspective, I don't propose to advertise myself as a lawyer or anything like that, but in my observation, the legal world has a tendency to define things away. And that's wherein the convenience pregnancies come in, or abortions. The writers of our national constitution were very clear that all branches of government were entitled to interpret the Constitution. And that is what I see in this bill. I support the bill, subject to your questions. Thank you.
Questions, Mr. Winnie? None? Witness opposed to the bill, please come forward. Please introduce yourself to the committee, spell your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes to tell us what we need to hear.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Wendy Volk. It's spelled W-E-N-D-Y, V as in Victor, O-L-K. I live here in Cheyenne. I'm a 5th generation Wyoming businesswoman. I am a wife and a parent of 2 daughters, and I am speaking in opposition of House Bill 152. As a Wyoming woman and a Republican, I cannot sit here silently considering the impact of the proposed legislation. I want abortion to be legal, safe, and accessible in Wyoming. By passing a bill such as this, it will make it illegal, and women will continue to be going to places like Colorado, or they will take matters into their own hand, which is what we do not want to see. That was the dark times of 1973 and before. I also want to just stress that in 2001, it was reported here in Wyoming, there were 92 abortions. All of those abortions were in the first 10 weeks of a woman's pregnancy, and they were medical abortions. So they were not done in a clinic. They were not done in a hospital. There was no neonatal intensive care. Those were in facilities that were, you're going to a reproductive health care facility, monitored in the medical profession. So those are not being done at the hospitals here in Wyoming or in Cheyenne. I also want to stress that this is going to discourage women from staying here when they have a choice to determine their careers. I have 2 daughters, as I mentioned. Neither one of them want to come back to Wyoming if we are anti-woman. This is a war on women. We should be encouraging our young women to make decisions. If they want to have a family, embrace that. If they're not ready for a family, embrace that. These are decisions. Throughout my entire life, I have helped dozens of women seek medical care. I am not an abortion provider. I am purely a volunteer and a friend. So when my friends say, what can I do? I'm Catholic and I'm afraid. I don't want someone to know here in Cheyenne what I'm doing. I'm up in Jackson. I'm afraid I'll bump into somebody when I go into a clinic. So I have provided transportation. I have given names and phone numbers and arranged for people to have medical care provided, because we don't want someone to go on the internet and do some type of a dangerous, illegal procedure that could harm them permanently or take their life. So again, I would just urge you, please consider this is a legislation that affects all of us, men and women, in terms of having equal rights in the equality state. And I will be happy to take questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Questions for the witness. Appreciate your brevity, right to the point. Representative Chestick.
Very briefly. I think you were in the room when I asked the good sponsor of the bill about the definition of conception, and was informed that it is intended to include fertilization forward. Do you have any concerns about that, as it may implicate birth control?
Witness.
Mr. Chairman, through you. Yes, Representative, I think as a woman, I have been pregnant. I've said I've been a mother. I'm a mother of 2 children. Both my pregnancies were very different. And when I thought I had conceived and when I actually had conceived. On my youngest child, Dr. Hinkle, who's here in the room, delivered my daughter and saved my life and her life. She was born at 28 weeks. Throughout my pregnancy, I did not realize I was developing a high risk pregnancy. And the medical profession kept saying I could not be as far along in my pregnancy as I was. And I knew how far along I was in my pregnancy. I could feel it in my body. I knew the signs because I'd been pregnant before. And then lo and behold, I developed preeclampsia. It became life-threatening. My blood pressure was ready to, I could have had a stroke right there and died. And so I think the problem is when we get into this matter that's very private, it's between a woman and her partner, her family. There is not an exact science. A veterinarian can't determine exactly how far along an animal is. Doctors with the very best, we are a world leading medical community here in Cheyenne, and they can't determine exactly how far a woman is in her pregnancy. And even with all of that, I think we get into a very complicated issue where it's my understanding, I don't think anyone on the committee or myself is a medical professional. I know my body. I know what's best for me. I don't think any of you can stand in my place and know exactly what that is. So whether it's reproductive health care of birth control or, is this a high risk pregnancy? Do I need to be down in Colorado? Our daughter was born weighing 1.5 pounds at 28 weeks. Can you imagine? She weighed 6 sticks of butter. She was 13 inches long. I did not think that was going to be a positive outcome, that I have a beautiful, healthy daughter who's in high school. She's excited about wanting to go on and become a teacher. She's scared to death to stay in Wyoming if this type of legislation is in place.
All right, a witness opposed or a witness in favor, witness in favor. Sir, state your name and spell your last name for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Gary Brown, BROWN. I'm a citizen of Cheyenne, Wyoming. This issue is very personal with me. When I was 30 years old, my second wife got pregnant, and against my will, she went and had an abortion. I left her, and then because I wanted to save my marriage, she came and she wanted me to come back and promised me she would never do that again. A few months later, she got pregnant again, came to me and told me she was going to have an abortion. And at that point, we did separate, we did divorce. I had 2 of my children deprived from me. That was 40 years ago. That's never left me. The fathers are always left out of this, and I don't think they should be. Now, as a young man, I was in an agriculture class, and I became a member of the Future Farmers of America, a great organization I think most of us know about. I had an opportunity at that point. We had to have a project in that organization. So I had 2 pigs. And when the first one gave birth, she had 10 piglets. 9 of them were born alive. 1 of them was born dead. At the point that it was born, it was about 2/3 smaller than the rest of the piglets. When something is not alive, it ceases to grow. And that was what I learned from that. As a layman, it's very easy to look at that and see that. And this is the same thing with human beings, because my first wife, her first pregnancy, she had a miscarriage. She was 12 weeks along. And when she miscarried,
We're about out of time.
okay, so when she miscarried, the doctor later told us that that baby had died at 10 weeks and ceased to grow. If something's not alive, it doesn't grow. This is a life. This is part of our Constitution.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Brown? Appreciate you being here today. Witness opposed. State your name for the record and you have 3 minutes.
Okay, hello, my name is Greg Hunter from Laramie, Wyoming. I'm here to speak against the bill. I've been watching those in the legislative body strive to teach history accurately and ensure that our youth understand the principles of our constitutional form of government. There have been many passionate arguments around this subject, and yet many of those making these arguments have signed on as co-sponsors to this bill. What makes you think it's constitutional? Those signing on to the legislation provide the proof they know it's not constitutional in the 10 Romanettes, 10, 1 through 10, and 35-6-21 findings and purposes. None of the findings used are based on any part of our US Constitution. This bill as proposed is unconstitutional. The Right to Life bill is a religious bill and is not polite or constitutional to bring.
Please leave the room with that phone immediately. Please leave the room with the phone. Please leave the room with the phone. You may continue.
All right.
For the interruption.
That's okay. The Right to Life bill is a religious bill and is not polite or constitutional to bring. The bringers give the game away in Romanet 10 when they use the Dobbs decision. You see, people like me believe that Dobbs is illegitimate because Republicans abandoned the filibuster, the 60 votes, to put 3 religious zealots on the Supreme Court. The idea that I do not have bodily autonomy as a fundamental constitutional right is a religious belief, again, proving the bringers do not understand why their God is not in the Constitution. Your God is not in the Constitution because the founders had watched civilized societies tear themselves apart prior to our founding over whose religious authority is correct. Thousands of years of people killing each other prior to our Constitution. Once that Constitution was passed, those religious wars stopped in a certain respect in some parts of the world. If the legislators backing this bill do not understand why even backing the bill is a danger to our Constitution and stability of the Republic, then we are in for a dark, really dark time. I will close by paraphrasing Senator Lynn Hutchings as she was making a point on the Senate floor recently. Keep the turd of religion out of our constitutional punch bowl. Thank you, and I'll stand for questions.
Question, Mr. Hunter. Thank you. Witness in favor? Please state your name for the record and you have 3 minutes.
Good morning. Sorry. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am Mara McManaman. That's spelled M-A-R-A. Last name is M-C-M-A-N-A-M-A-N. I am a 4th generation Wyomingite from Torrington in Goshen County. I am a private citizen, a mother of 2. In Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution, Section 2 states equality of all and their inherent right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All members of the human race are equal. This bill says it all, the right to human life. I am in support of this bill 100%. I would like to urge each and every one of you to vote aye on this bill. Abortion has affected my life personally, and it needs to stop. Thank you for your careful consideration, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you for coming this morning. Any questions? Very good. Witness against the bill. Please come forward. State your name and agency for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Buenos dias. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Antonio Serrano, and I'm the Advocacy Director for the ACLU of Wyoming. We are here today in strong opposition to this bill. It is an extreme overreach in a number of ways, and this bill makes abortion a felony by punishable by fines and imprisonment, and it removes current exceptions of rape and incest. Now, I grew up in a Wyoming that respects people's decisions and respects the way that they want to live their life and stays out of other people's business. This forces people to do something that they may not be ready to do, excuse me, which is not the Wyoming I know and love. This bill allows revocation of medical professionals' license and fines, forcing with fines, forcing medical professionals to make decisions based on Wyoming lawmakers' opinions rather than their medical expertise. I understand there is an exception to this, but what we have heard over and over again is that regardless of exceptions, these laws change how medical professionals practice medicine. HB 152 bans medications required for abortion, and this is completely unnecessary because plain and simple medication abortion care is safe, effective, and FDA approved with a 20-year track record. We also oppose this bill because it will hurt those who already face the biggest barriers to healthcare. This web of medically unnecessary, politically motivated restrictions isn't about protecting women. It's about pushing abortion care out of reach. The negative impact from restrictions on abortion care falls hardest on those who have low income, live in rural areas like most of Wyoming, and for people of color. Bills like this further the idea that Wyoming does not care about these people. It is important to remember that abortion is essential health care. The ability to access abortion is critical to a person's health, well-being, and dignity. When it comes to the most personal decisions in life, such as where to have a child, it should be up to the individual to decide for themselves, free from punishment, judgment, or political interference. Patients should be able to get care in the way that is best for them, and doctors should be able to treat their patients according to their best medical judgment. Access to abortion should not depend on where you live, how much money you make, or what Wyoming lawmakers think. Thank you. I stand for any questions.
Questions for the witness? Yeah, thank you very much for your comments. In favor? And after this, we'll go online and take a couple pro and con online. State your name and what we need to hear. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Brad Kerr. Last name is spelled K-E-H-R. I'm policy counsel with Americans United for Life. I just want to draw your attention briefly to a couple of points in this bill. I know that we've already heard pretty significant testimony about the nature of it. So I just want to highlight a few elements of it. First, this bill is intended to prohibit intentional destruction of human life. And that's important. There's a difference between the intentional destruction of human life and the accidental or the secondary destruction of human life. This bill is very explicit in laying out what the definition of abortion is. It says abortion is the taking of a human life, but it does not say, and let me reemphasize this, it says that abortion is not taking action to save or preserve the life of the unborn child. It is not taking action to care for an ectopic pregnancy or a tubular pregnancy. That is not considered an abortion. And additionally, caring for a miscarriage is not considered an abortion. Those are all things that OBGYNs typically do. What this says is that the intentional taking of an unborn human life or preborn human life is prohibited. Additionally, it goes further and it says that doctors continue to have discretion in the caring for the women and the children who are in their care. It says that if there's a situation that specifically threatens the life of the mother or the function of a life-sustaining organ or bodily function, then the doctor, in their discretion, can perform an abortion. That is for the purpose of saving the life of the mother and caring for her. It does go on to say that that abortion must be performed in a way that, if possible, to preserve the life of the unborn child, considering both patients that are being cared for by the OBGYN. Now, there's a couple of things that I also want to address in previous testimony. One of the things that we know from studies is that most abortions are not sought for medical care. They're actually sought, and let me read this quote from the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists.
Out of time, so it's a short quote.
I'll be very fast. It says basically that the primary focus of getting abortions is socioeconomic reasons or relational reasons or what are considered mental health reasons. But APLOG says that seeking an abortion for the case of saving the life of the mother or medical reasons is a very rare situation. I stand for any questions. Thank you.
Questions for the witness? Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Carr. were you here? I don't know if you were here for our discussion earlier about all of the constitutional provisions on page 3.
Yes.
And sorry, Mr. Chairman, it's Kurt. I mean, can you cue me in, for example, and 33 is the easy one because it has to do with property. I mean, can you explain to me why we're referring to property rights within this particular bill?
Mr. Kirk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Representative Kogo. I believe that the former speaker addressed that directly, and I think that his answer is the best answer on this, given that was a question not raised by the drafters of this bill, but raised by the courts themselves.
Mr. Kogo, Representative Kogo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kerr. Was it raised by the court or by litigants within that case?
Your Honor,
Mr. Kirk.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Prego, I will defer to Mr. Harrison's testimony on that. He is very closely involved with that. It is, as you can go and look at the documents for the case itself, the pleadings, you will see that is brought forward in those pleadings.
Thank you. All right, so let's go online for a witness against. If you're online waiting and you wish to testify against the bill, please raise your hand so we can be identified and brought into the room for testimony.
Can you hear me okay?
Who do we have?
Hi,
Please
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me okay?
I can. Please state your name for the record and you'll have 3 minutes.
Wonderful. Mr. Chairman, committee members, my name is Nikki Kaufman. That's spelled Kaufman. And I am here as a private citizen. I'm also here as a Jewish woman. I have loved that Wyoming has been so accepting of me as a Jewish woman, so welcoming. It's a place where people from all backgrounds can go about and feel part of this community. I think you all probably appreciate that aspect of Wyoming as well, the neighborliness, the acceptance that you see around the state. The legislature acknowledges that all members of the human race are created equal. In this bill, it says that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, the foremost, which is the right to life. However, as a Jewish woman, Jewish law does not share that belief, that abortion opponents believe the life begins at conception. The Talmud actually indicates that the ancient rabbis regarded a fetus as part of the mother throughout the pregnancy and is fully dependent on her for its life. And that life begins once the baby is born. I love and respect my Christian friends, my family members, and even the people in this room. I completely support your viewpoints. I would never tell them that their viewpoints on abortion are wrong when deciding what to do with their own pregnancy, with their own lives. And I would hope that you would have the same respect to me. So a lot of people have brought up committee member Chesnick, how do we define conception? Well, I would say the same. How do we define creator? It's not really clear. And I don't believe that a piece of legislation should define my God or my creator. And in doing so, tell me what I should be able to do with my own body because of that. I'm in strong opposition of this bill. I really appreciate you hearing all sides this morning. And I urge you to vote against this bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Kaufman. We're doing our best to hear everybody's point of view. Now, do we have somebody online who wishes to testify in favor of the bill? Can you bring them in? Are you there? Mr. Schiffman? I think you're on mute, sir. We cannot hear you. Are you off mute, Yana? Mr. Schriftman? Yeah, we have some type of technical problem there. Do you have another witness in favor? Unfortunately. Mr. Brechtel, can you join the meeting? Sorry, Mr. Schriftman, we can't hear you. We have some type of technical problem. Mr. Brechtel, are you there?
Now can you hear me?
Yes. Who is this, please?
This is Bob Brechtel, Casper, Natrona County, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brechtel. You have 3 minutes. Please tell us what you want us to know about House Bill 152.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in favor of House Bill 152. And I'm not going to speak to the religious part of this, although the previous person that was trying to come online would have a different view on the Jewish aspect. What I would like to speak to very quickly is the scientific issues. In the advent of the ultrasound, the famous neonatal scientist, Dr. Bernard Nathanson, concluded that he had made a horrible mistake with the killing of 60,000 unborn children. And he speaks of this in the New England Journal of Medicine back in the 70s. Ultrasound for the first time showed how babies only weeks old in the womb feel pain and actually fight to stay alive during abortion. Mr. Chairman, at the time, Dr. Nathanson was an atheist, but his conclusions were not even remotely religious, but squarely based on scientific biological facts. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll rest my comments.
Thank you. We have a witness online opposed to the bill? Christine Lichtenfels. Christine, are you there? And we'll try to circle back to Mr. Schriftman if we can.
Hello? Yes, I'm here.
Christine Lichtenfels?
Yes, that's correct. Christine Lichtenfels, Lichtenfels.
Very good. You have 3 minutes to tell us what you'd like us to hear, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm from Lander. As a lawyer, a woman, a Wyoming citizen, and as someone who helps women access abortion care, I am shocked and saddened by this bill. This bill will not only hurt women, Wyoming and its women, but children and families. Being able to make personal decisions free from governmental interference about one's own body, one's own family, one's own health, one's own procreation is a fundamental human right and has been a traditional Wyoming value. As this legislature wisely stated years ago.
Yes, he did. Video call you later. Use that word. Oh, I'm sorry.
What? Okay.
Mr. Brechtel, will you mute, please? Drop him off.
Uh,
All right, back to Ms.
So,
Lichtenfels.
sure. This legislature wisely stated years ago regarding family planning and birth control, it said nothing should restrict self-determination in the procreation of children. That's 42-5-102. That self-determination reflects Wyoming values and should guide the legislature's actions. This bill is a massive overreach of government, attempting to create an alternate reality where effectively the start of life is being redefined, contrary to the common understanding of what the start of life is, namely being born. As I noted previously in my written comments to you all, common dictionary definitions show that being born is coming out of its mother's body at the beginning of its life, or starting life, or coming into existence. applying the principle that a negative, namely is the opposite of that which is not being unborn cannot mean the same as the beginning of life that being born means. I realize we're in a world where alternate facts exist in the world of politics and media, but that does not mean that alternate facts should exist in law. I'll just move forward. This bill is redundant, as I believe Representative Crago noted. A law is currently on the books outlawing abortion. Yes, it is under litigation. I believe it was also Representative Crago who asked whether this bill solves existing legal issues. I'll just note that the definition of reasonable medical judgment is the same, raises the same concerns of being less than clear, especially when there is a criminal penalty associated with it. So physicians are not going to know exactly what is safe and what is not safe, or what is legal and what is not legal. And so they won't take action there.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Lichtenfeld. Appreciate you coming to join us today and offering your comments. I know it's hard, there's 3 minutes, but we have
Sure.
lots of witnesses waiting.
Thank you very much.
Fair to everybody here. All right. Mr. Schriftman, is he back or not? Mr. Schriftman, can you hear us? You're still on mute, Mr. Schriftman. Sorry, we can't hear you. Something wrong with your link. So we'll go to another online in favor. Anybody else online that wants to speak in favor of the bill? Okay. So we have a witness online who wishes to testify in favor of the bill. Would you please raise your hand? Virtual hand. Let's go back to the room. A witness in the room in favor of the bill. State your name for the record and you have 3 minutes.
Patrick Farrelly, Farrelly. Citizen, no expertise in nothing except auto body repair, which I did for 40 some years, but going through, get the religious out of it, secular, scientific, a seed fertilized, implanted, come to term is whatever the seed was. A corn seed becomes a corn. Rancher plants hay seeds, which people around the country will call us, and rightfully so, and I'm proud to be it. A farmer grows tomatoes with tomato seeds. This bill is asking you people, our representatives, to come to task and define when life begins for the state of Wyoming and the people thereof. It's on your shoulders. You can put an end to the abortion. You can put an end to the right to life fight for right to life and the abortions against it and all the other stuff by defining when life begins. Ranchers, farmers, the guy talking about his pigs on the FFA. If a seed is fertilized, a corn seed is fertilized in the ground, it grows to an ear of corn. Same thing with a tomato seed. A human seed, same thing. When the sperm hits the egg, you got a third entity. When 2 things come together and produce one thing, that is an individual thing. That's a corn crop. That's a tomato plant. It's up to you people to put a definitive on when life begins for the citizens of Wyoming. I would like Wyoming to be the one state in the union that has a definitive scientific proven fact of life, that life come to fertilization is life. This unborn fetus, child put to term will be a human being. You know, if somebody interrupts that, if something happens to that fetus, that fertilized egg, and it doesn't come full term, then it won't be. It'll be a dead or non-growing. So I'm asking you people to put a definitive legal line in the sand saying Wyoming stands for this. It's scientifically proven. It's a fact of life. Fertilized egg or fertilized seed grown to term will be whatever it was that was the seed.
Thank you, Mr. Sauer.
Scientific. That's all I've
Appreciate
got.
it.
Thank you very much.
Witness in the room against the bill. Please come forward. State your name for the record, spell your last name, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, Committee. My name is Marcy Kindred, Kindred. I'm a voter here in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I'm here today for this horse and pony show, as 5 members on this committee are co-sponsors of this bill. We all likely know how this is going to go. But knowing that, those of us against this bill still dug our vehicles out, showed up in negative 10-degree weather to implore, to plead. I'm not above begging you to reconsider. We have physicians in here telling you this is going to make their job difficult, sometimes impossible, and possibly criminal. In a state that is struggling to recruit and maintain physicians, that seems very problematic. We've got professionals, stay-at-home mothers, fathers, grandmothers. I know that there are very strong feelings on both sides of this bill. There always is when it comes to matters of belief, personal belief. The core argument around this whole debate is a matter of belief, the belief of when life begins. And when it comes down to it, that belief varies from person to person, from religion to religion, and the only way to respect everyone's belief is by maintaining access to abortion care. This bill defines life beginning at conception, and personally, you are free to teach and preach whatever you choose in your home, at your pulpit. I support everyone's right to do so. I would show up here at 7:30 in negative 10-degree weather to defend your right to do that. But I believe, as someone who attends church every Sunday, as someone who has experienced the miracle of pregnancy and brought 4 humans into this world, I believe personally, spiritually, that life does not begin at conception. I believe it is much more nuanced than that. And I believe that is between me and my God. As a proud American that believes in freedom, that the freedom of religion is sacred, you are welcome to disagree. I respect your beliefs. You're welcome to pray for me. I'll be praying for you, but please do not infringe on my beliefs. I would love to work hand in hand with you on legislation that will actually support families, that will reduce the need for pregnant persons to seek abortions due to lack of support or resources. Deacon Lehman brought up Medicaid expansion. He and I follow each other around and testify at all these committees. There's a great bill for postpartum extension, and it would be such a better use of our time if we could focus on something, working towards something, instead of this impossible discussion of defining belief and who's right on this issue. Thank you. I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony this
Thank you,
morning,
Chair.
and coming out in the cold weather.
Yes.
Mr. Winter? Okay, next up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jessica Rubino, Rubino, and I am with the State Freedom Caucus Network. Thank you so much for opening up public comment back to the individuals in the room today. I know this bill is a hot topic. I'd like to quickly comment on the separation of powers issues that have been brought up repeatedly. In our system, we have 3 different branches of government. We all know that. And our 3 different branches, often they play tennis with each other. A really good example of this is the income tax. We all know we have an income tax, a federal income tax. It's the result of a constitutional amendment. In 1865, Congress tried to pass a law, the Income Tax Act, and the Supreme Court struck it down almost immediately, saying you don't have the power to do this. It has to do with the equal amount of taxes being paid by each person, proportionality. And so Congress went back, they took that feedback from the Supreme Court, and in 1913, they amended the Constitution to give us the 16th Amendment, which is now why we have to pay a federal income tax. So what's happening right now with this piece of legislation, it's the judicial branch and the legislative branch playing a game of tennis, going back and forth. And the legislative branch is attempting to state the policy of the state of Wyoming. The legislature is defining terms, and as was mentioned earlier, that happens in every single bill that is passed here. I'd also just really quickly like to mention one thing regarding the concern that Representative Chestek, I want to call you Professor Chestek, brought up regarding contraceptives. If I could direct you to page 8, lines 17 through 22. Nothing in this act shall be construed to prohibit the use, sale, prescription, or administration of a contraceptive measure. So any concerns regarding contraceptives should be alleviated by that part, page 8, line 17 through 22. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you for coming out in the cold this morning. Witness in the room against. Please state your name and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Westnut. My name is Kathleen Peterson, Kathleen Petersen. I'm rising in opposition to this bill. The problem I have with it is defining that life begins at conception. I think it opens up a whole different line of legal issues. I've seen this happen in the past where, say, spouse abuse, where a man assaults a woman that's pregnant, that there's been an attempt to charge him with murder if the wife loses the baby. Also, I think about if there's a car accident, say that the woman didn't know that she was 12 weeks pregnant, and as a result, she loses the baby. Does the driver of the other car get charged with murder because he's caused the abortion of that baby? So I think it opens up not only under this issue, but it opens up a whole lot of other legal issues that I'm not sure that's been thought all the way through. There's been the definition of and I'm not sure, it's like 12 weeks or 15 weeks that's already legal on the books. I think that's worked to everybody's benefit without causing this saying that it starts at conception. And I stand for questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the brevity.
Thank you.
Mr. Winters? And after Mr. Winters, we'll go back online if we can identify someone against online and then someone in favor online. Mr. Winters.
Thank you,
please
Mr.
state your
Chairman
name.
Committee. My name is Nathan Winters, President of the Wyoming Family Alliance. I walked in and have heard several individuals declare that the right to life was merely a religious perspective, and I rise in opposition to that argument. The right to life is so foundational that it's deemed a truth that is self-evident. Science has demonstrated that fact for us. And that's the reason why the argument that is purely a religious perspective has been abandoned a long time ago by many people in the scientific community. For example, Dr. Keith Moore, in his Developing Human Clinically Oriented Embryology, makes this statement: a zygote is the beginning of a human being. Dr. Sadler, in Langman's Medical Embryology Journal, says this: development begins with fertilization, the process by which the male gamete and the sperm and the female gamete, the oocyte, unite and give rise to a zygote. The zygote is formed by this union. It is the beginning of a new human being. And some of the testimony of eminent abortionists of the past even says this. For instance, the famous utilitarian Peter Singer, who approves of both abortion and infanticide and of handicapped infants, says this: there is no doubt that from the first moments of its existence, an embryo conceived from human sperm and eggs is a human being. The former president of Planned Parenthood, Faye Waddleton, said this: I think we have deluded ourselves into believing that people don't know that abortion is killing. So any pretense that abortion is not killing is a signal of our ambivalence, a signal that we cannot say, yes, it kills a fetus. And Furiedi, head of England's largest chain of abortionists, says this: we can accept that an embryo is a living thing in the fact that it has a beating heart, that it has its own genetic system within it. It's clearly human, and that in a sense it's not a gerbil, and we can recognize that it is indeed a human life. But the point is not when does life begin, but when does it begin to matter? For most people in this room, I do believe that life begins to matter from that moment of conception. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would answer any comments.
Thank you, Mr. Winters. Appreciate the brevity. Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Winters, good to see you. So I've been asking all these questions about the constitutionality of this particular bill, not because I am pro-choice. It's the exact opposite. I want to make sure we have a law on the books that prohibits abortion. And so my question for you is have you had any independent counsel look at that particular issue? Because as we go forward, if this bill passes, it will repeal the law. It specifically repeals the law we passed last year, which I think is going to withstand constitutional questioning. I'm not sure this one is. And so my question to you is, have you, with your organization, had anybody look at that for that exact issue?
Mr. Winters.
Mr. Chairman and Representative, yes, sir. We've had the opportunity to correspond with groups from Americans United for Life, as well as the Susan B. Anthony list and their conjoining legal group, the Charlotte Lozier Institute, and they've had an opportunity to look at this. So you're right. There is a question that has arisen in law, and we don't know exactly how the Supreme Court will adjudicate last year's legislation. This is an attempt really to take the arguments that have been lined out in that court case and try to answer them. As to how that will turn out, again, I'm not a lawyer. And so we've tried to have people look at that. I can't give you all the details as to what their determination is because there's so many questions in the air from this court case that's ongoing.
Representative Craigle.
Follow up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Winters, have you had any Wyoming lawyers look at this?
Mr. Winters.
Mr. Chairman and Representative, the one that I'm aware of is already spoken, and the lawyer, Mr. Fred Harrison, has been able to look at this very carefully. So beyond that, I'm not aware of others, but he is considered very eminent on the subject.
Thank you. So we have someone online opposed. Bring her in. Ms. Anthony, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Please state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes to tell us what the committee needs to hear.
Thank you, Chairman Washut, and I will keep it brief. My name is Jovanina Anthony, last name Anthony. I'm a practicing OBGYN in Jackson for the last 20 years. I oppose HB 152 for many reasons, but I'd like to focus on 2 primary areas to keep it brief. First, the bill declares that life begins at conception, as many have debated back and forth whether or not this should be acceptable in this bill. But I do believe this is an infringement on the rights of citizens to maintain their own personal beliefs without interference from the state government. There's a big difference between making abortion illegal, in my view, and telling Wyomingites when life begins. We will never all agree on when life begins. I think this is very clear from the back and forth occurring today. And in my view, it should not be legislated. Also, it has not been brought up that if we legislate that life begins at the moment of fertilization and this bill becomes law, then this legislature is essentially made in vitro fertilization services illegal in Wyoming. The process of IVF requires embryos of genetic concern to be discarded, and this happens constantly and all the time in embryology labs. And no IVF provider would come to the state to practice with this law in place. Abortion is healthcare, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this except to say that the American Medical Association, American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, American Academy of Family Practice, and American Association of Emergency Physicians all agree that abortion is healthcare, and these are hardly fringe organizations. I am stunned by the witnesses who do not work in women's health who claim that abortion harms women and their health. Why would those of us who have dedicated our lives to women's health support any treatment that harms our patients? This truly does defy rationality. Wyoming is singular in its roots in keeping the government out of people's lives. If this legislature is so willing to force Wyoming women to be pregnant against their will, that it would tell Wyomingites what they can and can't believe, then we truly are on the road to losing all of our rights and freedoms. I urge this committee to vote no on this bill. Thank you, committee members and Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Doctor. Questions for witness? Seeing none. Anybody else online in favor?
I do not know.
Okay. Do you have someone in the room in favor? One more, if you're online and you want to speak against the bill, raise your hand. If you're online and you're in favor of the bill, take your hand down just for a moment so that staff can identify who's in favor and who's opposed. All right, please begin. You have 3 minutes. State your name for the record, please.
Good morning. My name is Lilia Olejnik. That's spelled Olejnik. I live in Cheyenne. And I am here as a mother and a sister of, my sister had an abortion and it destroyed her life. She was very young. She's now in her 50s and she continues to grieve the loss of what she did with her baby. And it didn't help her, like a lot of people claim to say it helps women. It didn't help her at all. It destroyed her soul. I'm also here as an Army veteran. I served for 11 years in active duty. I deployed 3 times. I was in Iraq twice, and I was in Afghanistan 1 time. I was also a drill sergeant, and I had to teach soldiers first aid. And one of the things that I learned when I went through basic training was to check for pulse. You always check for pulse because that way you know if you should render care to that soldier or if you should move on to the next. Because if there is no pulse, there's no heartbeat, there's no life. So you go to where there's life. So there is life at 2 weeks. We know this. And so why is it okay to kill a heartbeat when we can hear it? And also, before that, this Dr. Hinkle mentioned that we can't prove that life begins at conception, but you can't prove either that it doesn't. Nobody can say with certainty, 100% certainty, the life doesn't begin at fertilization. Nobody can. This is the equality state. During my time in the Army, I was often tagged as the equal opportunity officer, and I learned a lot about equality. We must have equal protection for all human beings. And not protecting the heart beatings that are inside the womb is not equal protection. I'm almost done, sir. I apologize. And in regards to rape, it's not okay to punish a child for the sins of the father. I certainly would not want to be held accountable for the sins of my father. I have enough to deal with on my own. Thank you for your time. I stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. Question? Okay, do you have a witness online selected? This would be a witness opposed? Moyer? Okay. Ms. Moyer, are you out there? Good morning. Can you hear us?
I can. Good morning, Chairman,
Please
committee
state
members.
your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Sure. Tara Muir. I'm the Public Policy Director with the Wyoming Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. Thank you for having this hearing today. This bill will remove critical options for victims in very difficult and often dangerous situations. Victims are not always women, but the topic here is all about women and reproduction. Advocates at our programs, our staff, our volunteers, we see daily the torment caused by the loss of power and control over one's own body, one's most intimate self. And that's at the heart of sexual and domestic violence. Trying to mandate these kinds of ethical and moral questions in Wyoming state law is very difficult. Parental rights, fetal rights, women's rights, it must all be a balancing act. I don't see any of that in House Bill 152. It is a mandate that makes women second or even third-class citizens. Our bedrock duty in our work as advocates, and it's to support and empower victims, to walk beside them and trust that they do know what's best for themselves and their children's safety. Most importantly, we hope to restore the notion of freedom back into their lives so that they begin to see themselves as survivors and don't have to be victims anymore. Often survivors rely on their religion, their own view of God, to help them recover from violence. Securing their rights in abortion care is central to continued security of their religious rights and freedom, because religions have different stances, as you've all been hearing, of when human life begins. Abortion bans necessarily promote one religious view over another. Our work here is to always support the survivor, whatever their choice, for themselves and their families. It's difficult to understand the dynamics of domestic and sexual violence. An abuser often uses access to birth control, healthcare, and abortion. Sometimes they force victims to have one. Sometimes they refuse to allow one. Rape and pregnancy are convenient tools to maintain complete control as well. My last point is that this bill's unwillingness to balance these human rights of the mother with the fetus is akin to the ultimate abuse of power over women's lives, dictating to them, like an abuser would, that her life and her choices mean nothing. Her liberty and her freedom mean nothing. And we can't let that stand in Wyoming. Happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Muir. Good to see you again. Do you have somebody else online in favor? No? Anybody in the room in favor? State your name for the record, and then you have 3 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Dana Jennings, and I am here as a citizen. This is the first time in 8 years I have testified before a committee. I am here because I want you to know why we fight so hard for pro-life. I believe that the life is so precious. It has been granted to us, given us by a loving God who has created each one of us. Why we fight pro-life so hard is because I believe that the pro-life encompasses all life. It encompasses the baby that has just been created, to the older person that in some countries are considered a useless eater. Our life is so precious. Their life is precious from the time they're created till the time of natural death. We fight hard, not only for the baby, but we fight for every human being on this planet that has a gift and was created for good, to serve their fellow man. I believe that this also helps the woman. We've been told that we hate women, that we don't want to, that we're not giving them the freedom to make their choices, but I believe we're giving them a great freedom. We fight so hard because every life is precious. I don't want that 80-year-old person told that they're a useless eater, they don't matter. That's why I fight so hard for pro-life. And I would stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. Witness against? How about in the room? We have a witness against in the room, one online? Snyder? Mary Alice Snyder online, you there? Ms. Snyder? Ms. Snyder, can you hear me? Are you there, Ms. Snyder? You're on mute. Still on mute.
Sorry,
All right.
I
Ms.
had to, thank you. I had to pivot. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mary Alice Snyder. I live in Laramie, and I've called Wyoming my home for over 41 years. My husband and I raised our 2 children here. I'm here today because I vehemently oppose this bill. My life is a human right too. So is the life of my daughter a human right. And so is the life of any pregnant person facing the decision to carry a pregnancy to term. Every sentient human has the right to make any and all decisions that will affect their destiny and be free from interference in those very private and personal decisions. And inherent in that destiny is the right to bodily autonomy and the right to consent. For me, this is the crux of the matter. To this and every other anti-choice bill that comes forward, that has been put forward in the past and today and in the future. To start, I would like to extend a deep gratitude to every person that has reached out to their elected officials either by writing about or speaking in public about their private stories. Like some choices they had to make, I know that sharing those details was not easy. It was likely quite traumatic. And that expression of vulnerability for the sole purpose of begging, demanding that half of the population keep the right to their bodily autonomy. I do not have an abortion story, but I do have a consent and bodily autonomy story, a story about a choice that I did not have.
Sadly, Ms. Snyder, we're out of time. We have to wrap up this hearing and get back up to the chamber floor by 10 o'clock. So we do appreciate you joining us and speaking your mind on the bill. Thank you. Representative Rodriguez Williams, you bring us home, and then we will end public comment after your statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just like to answer a few questions that were brought up and statements, push back on a few statements that were made. Mr. Chairman, Representative Crago, to answer your question as to whether or not we're aware of any other Wyoming legislators that are attorneys that helped work on this bill. And yes, there are several private attorneys that did contribute that reside and practice law within the state of Wyoming. In regards to the comments that were made by the physician that practices within the capital city, stating that why are we doing this? And the reason is because we have the right to, as lawmakers, we have the right to protect preborn children, because preborn children are members of the human race. They're human beings. Under the 14th Amendment, there is no constitutional right to abortion. The 14th Amendment says person. And again, the preborn are members of the human species. Abortion, furthermore, is a grave act of injustice and should be outlawed in states. Wyoming has attempted to do that. In regard to, I never once have mentioned religion. There was another comment that was made about the Jewish faith. And I'm glad that comment was made, because I can talk a little bit about the Coalition for Jewish Values that represents over 2,000 traditional Orthodox rabbis in American public policy. They recently published in the media and decried against a lawsuit against the state of Missouri And there was dozens of rabbis within the state of Missouri and other faith leaders that called the suit a desecration of God's name that is simply beyond words. The Coalition for Jewish Values rejected these ideas upon which the lawsuit was based. One being that a pro-life position places religion over science, that valuing fetal life is uniquely tied to one's religion, and that legislators should be expected to discard their religious views when formulating public policy positions.
Representative Rodriguez Williams, it's 9:55. We're going to have to wrap this up.
Oh, okay.
So first off, on this, in public comment, Representative Rodriguez Williams, obviously, when the committee works with Bill, you'll be able to share additional information. I want to apologize to all those who came out who didn't get a chance to participate today, either online or here in the room. Just the reality of a citizen legislature that we tried to cover a lot of material in a short period of time, and there are time constraints that we all have to operate under. And I think we got a pretty good cross-section of views today. The committee will work the bill at our next meeting, and we'll make our decisions. But thank you again. I appreciate everybody's participation, your respect for one another as we dealt with this very difficult subject this morning. Thank you very much.